Hi and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Marilyn. I'd like to share with you a treasured family recipe for potato blintzes this morning that came from my grandmother, who was the head chef and owner of the Marci Deli in Brooklyn, New York in the 40s. Okay, so we're going to start prepping our filling for the blintzes today. I've got 2.5 pounds of potatoes, cubed and ready to go. I'm going to drain out the water and add them to boiling water with a teaspoon of salt for flavoring. Give them a quick stir and let them cook until they're ready. Then we're going to come over to our nonstick skillet, which I find a lot easier to work with, and put in about a tablespoon or two, about a tablespoon and a half of neutral flavored oil. It's already hot, so I can put my onions right in to get started. And this is 1.5 pounds of thinly sliced onion. Give that a stir, and we'll let that start working. Add about a teaspoon of kosher salt. Give it a stir to make sure everything's coated well. And we'll let that caramelize down until soft and light brown, and then we'll go from there. Let's start making the crepes. We're going to have 3 cups of flour, all-purpose flour, or you can use a gluten-free blend with xanthan gum if you prefer. 4 eggs, 3 cups of water, and a half teaspoon of salt. So we're going to start by taking the water and mixing it in with a whisk, I think is the best way to do it, slowly, and get that all blended nice and smooth. This will make a large quantity of batter, and you may not need all of this for the blintzes, but this makes a wonderful crepe as well. Once that's smooth, then we're going to whisk up the eggs just a little bit to break them up. You can do this beforehand if you want. And once that's broken up, we'll add that to the batter and continuing whisking until that's smooth. Depending on the flour you use, because sometimes flours are drier than others, you may need to add a little bit more water for the consistency that works best, but this looks good. And then we're going to add that half teaspoon of salt to give it a little bit of flavor. And then we're going to let this just set for a few minutes to give the flour a chance to absorb the liquid. And if you're using a gluten-free flour, really important to let it set for a little while for the xanthan gum to expand and be able to bind your batter well when you go to cook it. So let's make the blintlock, or the pancakes, or crepes, whatever you want to call them. So we're going to gently grease, very lightly grease, a 6-inch base saute pan. This is non-stick. I love it. I've been using it for years, so it works really well. Any crepe pan or shallow saute pan will work. Take your batter, put a scoop of batter in, and then quickly roll it around and let the excess drip back out. You want a fairly thin batter. If it's too thick, you can thin it with a little water, but that's just about right. Then back on the burner, and we'll let it cook for a few minutes. So the way you test that a blintlock or the blintz batter is done is you'll notice the edges of the pancake begin to pull away from the pan. And once you see that and some light bubbling on the surface, you know your crepe is done. The other way I tell is by checking the handle here, which you'll make every time you make the crepe because you're pouring off the extra batter. You can begin to see the edges here pulling away, means it's getting cooked. And then my final test is when I can gently pull back the handle, see how easily that goes? That's done. So we're going to remove it from the oven and pull it over to the cloth. So we've drained the potatoes. They were nice and tender, fork tender. I've taken the onions and mixed them into the mashed potatoes. You can use a hand potato masher or an immersion blender. I like it a little bit coarser, so I just use a regular hand potato masher. Get them nice and creamy, salt to taste, pepper and salt if you choose. Add your onions and blend them well, and your potato mixture is ready to go, ready to fill your Blintzes. I usually let it cool down to room temperature. You don't want it too hot, just easier to work with that way. So we have room temperature mashed potatoes with caramelized onion, a touch of salt, and we're ready to fill our Blintzes. I have a couple of the crepes ready to go. I've got my filling ready to go, and you'll notice that the pancakes are cooked on this side, but raw on this side. You want to fill the cooked side. If you're going to use the batter as crepes, then you would flip this and cook the other side as well for a few minutes to set the dough. But we're just going to use the cooked side as for filling. So I'm going to take about 2 to 3 tablespoons of filling. This is a very soft filling, so it molds well. And I'm going to take the handle and fold it over the top, which gets your Blintzes started. Then we're going to fold in the sides, and kind of using your fingers, guide those side pieces in as you roll forward. Takes a little bit of practice, but once you've done it a couple of times, it goes really quickly, and there's your finished Blintze. What I do when I'm done with these is take them over to a cornmeal dusted tray and put them on the bottom, because the cornmeal will absorb extra moisture. You don't want these to weep, and the batter sometimes does. So the cornmeal will keep it from weeping. So let's do one more. Take your cooked side of your crepe, take about 3 to 4 tablespoons of filling, a little bit more or a little less. A little bit less to start might make it easier for you to fill. Take the handle, pull it over the top, take the sides, fold them up, and then just begin rolling forward, tucking in the sides as you go. And you're done. There is your Blintze. Onto the cornmeal tray, and we'll keep going. So we're ready to cook our Blintzes now that they're stuffed and rolled and ready to go. I've got my nonstick skillet here. It's about an 8-inch skillet, and I've got the heat on medium, not too hot because we don't want the pancakes to burn. We want them to cook through all the way. I use grapeseed oil because it's neutral tasting, and I don't want to impart any other flavor to the pancake or the Blintze itself. I'm going to sprinkle about teaspoon and a half of oil into the pan and let it get hot, just so that I can hold my hand there for a couple of minutes. And once it's at that temperature, we're going to add the Blintzes and get them browning. So you can see the Blintzes are browning quite nicely. I flipped them over, and it's exactly what you want, just a beautiful golden brown finish. And when they're done on the other side, I will flip them on the side just so they brown all the way around. Just takes a few minutes, but again, don't rush it because you don't want the pancake part to burn. You want it to crisp nicely, but also heat all the way through. So we'll flip them again in a few minutes, and I'll show you the finished product. So our Blintzes are crisp and brown and ready to enjoy. I usually serve them with applesauce or sour cream, sometimes both, and we have everything plated and ready to go. I hope you will enjoy this recipe for Blintzes as much as my family has for many years. And I want to thank my grandmother and all grandmothers for sharing their wonderful traditions and recipes through the years. Thanks so much, and enjoy.